All right guys, today we're looking at this new Dado set from Whiteside Plus. It's got a really high tooth count on the outer blades, 44 teeth in fact. We're going to do a review, demonstration, and show you all the details coming up. So what do we get when you open the box in this Whiteside Plus Dado set? The outer blades have extremely high tooth count, and if you imagine a 10-inch blade even having 44 teeth, that gets up into the moderately high range. Cram all those teeth onto an 8-inch Dado set, and it's really a high tooth count. And typically that equates to being able to do finer finish work with less chip out, whether that be veneer product like plywood or actually doing joinery work with hardwood. So I was really encouraged to see the 44 tooth count on the outer blades. And as far as hook angle, it's got a nice soft hook angle. It's a -6-degree hook angle, which typically might increase your feed pressure slightly or slow you down just a little bit from full cabinet shop production speed. But in return, what you get is an ultra fine finish quality and no chip out, no blowout on the exit side of the cut. And that's always a trade-off I'm willing to make. As far as the chipper, it's more of a conventional 2-wing chipper. They have a little more positive angle on that. But 2-wing chipper is a very standard setup for a dado blade. One interesting thing I noticed on the back of these blades is there's a plate thickening. It starts a little bit in from the edge of the blade. It just gives the center of the blade a thicker, sturdier feel to it. Outward on the blade, it's a little bit thinner again, and then you get to the finely machined alternating bevel style teeth with that -6-degree hook angle. So looking at these, basically I'm pleased with the machining that I see. You do have the flat raker teeth and that are available to clean up the cut, and then your alternating bevel teeth, of course, prevent chip out with thin veneer material like plywood. There's quite a variety of Shim Stock that comes with the set as well. There are thick white laminated shims, and the laminated white ones are 0.02 inches. There's a clear plastic variety, and those are 0.01 inch. And then there's the instructions call it a violet, but it looks like it's been switched to a white non-laminated paper is 5 thousandths. And then there's a silver shim, which is 2 thousandths. So basically the set includes 4 1/8 inch chippers, the 2 outer blades, and then a thin chipper at just a 1/16 inch thick. And so in combination with the 16th chipper and any number of the shims here, and you should be able to match undersized plywood cuts. When looking at the shim stock used, manufacturers typically have a choice of metal, paper, plastic, or magnetic shims. In the past, I've been dissatisfied with the thin metal shims because after the first time you use them, they tend to develop a bend down around the arbor. If the shim catches on the arbor and the nut pinches a little bend into that, it almost renders them unusable. So typically I'll use magnetic shims wherever possible, although magnetic shims don't always let you use a very thin shim. And so this laminated and plastic assortment of shims is interesting. I think it's a nice approach because you're not going to bend them out of shape like you would with metal shims, but you can also go down to 2 thousandths of an inch, which is much thinner than you can do with the magnetic shims. I like to really give a good evaluation of a dado stack. I've got about 13 full dado sets in the shop right now. So as you can imagine, I've seen just about every sort of tooth configuration, blade geometry, hook angle that you could imagine. And so we'll put this on 2 different table saws and see how it performs. One will be a Laguna Fusion F2, which is a 1 3/4 horsepower hybrid table saw. The other will be a full 3 horsepower cabinet saw. So we'll get to work on that test and see how this Whiteside Plus dado blade performs. I'll start with the outer blade. Feels like that's a nice snug fit onto the 5/8 inch arbor. No slop or wiggle room there, which of course is absolutely key for a dado stack to work well. And where that first chipper meets the outer blade, you can just nestle that tooth right in this little space. Remember, we've got 44 teeth on the outer blade, so it's nice to nestle that one tooth. It only really matters where the first chipper lays up next to the outer blade. And then we'll just keep adding chippers until we have a full 3/4 inch stack. And we'll add the second outer blade. And here again, this is the last chipper we put on, and so we'll look to align that between these spaces of series of teeth. And if you don't have room for the arbor washer, it's fine. Just go ahead and install the arbor nut. And top it off with the locking throat plate. With these 44 tooth outer blades, the total tooth count for a 3/4 inch stack is 96 teeth. So that's a pretty impressive high tooth count for a dado set. I usually set up for a 1/4 inch dado cut when I'm testing dado blades, and that way I just get a consistent idea for how a blade set performs. So a groove with the grain is usually the easiest test for a dado blade to pass. The Whiteside Plus is no exception. It's a very good clean cut with the grain in hardwood. I feel nice crisp edges maintained. There's no tear out. I don't see any exit blowout of any kind, even soft peach fuzz or anything. It's just a really clean cut. But what's amazing, and I'm sure won't come through in video, the bottom of the cut just looks like it was cut by a single blade. It's just perfectly flat across this 3/4 inch thickness. So that's a really good sign, and actually surprised me because it has 2-wing chippers that it could cut such a fine flat bottom. And then we'll make some cross-grain dados. That'll test the blade a little more. We'll give that a shot. I'm noticing this is a really quiet dado head. Even the cross-grain dados, it just kind of hums along. It's got a nice, pleasant sound to it, and it's not as loud as some of the other cutters I've experienced. So, in these tests, I'm noticing really clean edges on the show surface, no chip out whatsoever. The ultimate test is kind of the blowout on the exit side of the cut. On this first pass, I did notice a tiny little bit of exit chip out, and what I realized is I hadn't moved my sacrificial fence over on my miter gauge. And so I took care of that real quick and made another pass, and it completely eliminated the problem. Absolutely no exit blowout, no chip out at all on that back side, so that's really excellent results. Let's try some cross grain cuts in walnut. Okay, in the walnut, on the entry side of the cut, perfect. Along the show side, perfect. On the exit, one was perfectly clean. The second one had this little bit of peach fuzz on it where I can just scratch at it, and it's obviously remnants from the piece that was removed because there's no damage to the side wall, the end grain, I should say edge grain of this workpiece. So really clean looking cuts, and again, just like the maple, we're seeing a totally flat bottom cut, which to me is astonishing. I have several dado blades that will leave a flat bottom cut within a 3/4 inch stack, but for a 2-wing chipper blade to do that, that's pretty remarkable to me. And now for one of the best tests of a dado blade, we're going to do tenon cuts on a tenon that's actually wider than the full thickness of the blade, so we'll be able to evaluate what kind of scoring marks those outer blades leave in a tenon. For that, I've installed a little sacrificial fence on the Fusion F2, and we'll do some test cuts. So here we do see a pair of light ridges where the outer teeth, again they're ATB, although they're not real high ATB, they are alternating bevel teeth. So we expect that those will leave score lines. If you plan where those score lines are and you happen to be doing a through tenon or something that really shows, that's easy to account for. Just make your cut that's near the tip of the board almost full width and you'll be able to hide any of those score lines. If you were doing a half lap joint or something, this is fine enough that the glue would easily fill that, so I'm not too worried about that. We can evaluate other things as far as corner chip out. This one looks perfectly crisp and clean. This one I'd give about a 9 out of 10, looks pretty good. This one's perfect. This one here we did get a little bit of exit chip out. I would say it's mild. The cut quality on this one's maybe a 7 out of 10. I notice that happens a lot on dado blades, and it's just because you're cutting across the grain. I was cutting probably 3/16 of an inch thickness here. To avoid that, what I would do is just lower my blade height for the final pass and just shave smaller amounts, and you'd come up with a nice looking workpiece. Let's look at another situation where our dado cut is going to be wider than the full stack, and this would be a situation like we were doing a half lap joint, and we'll check quality on that. Edges here, almost no blowout. I'd give that one about a 9 out of 10. Entry cut, 10 out of 10, perfect. So a lot of good things going with this cut. All right, let's make a 3/4 inch wide tenon in maple. Okay, as far as cut quality, the flatness of the face of the tenon is just absolutely flat. It looks wonderful. As far as any exit blowout, this is a perfect corner, perfect corner. This one I can just wipe it away easily and it looks just about perfect. So even in this tricky situation, this was our sample board where we already had a groove with the grain and the tenon came across that. Even these layers here, no chip out or blowout whatsoever. That's really impressive. And now we'll cut a shallow tenon. I've really decreased my depth of cut with the dado blade. I want to see if that changes the cut quality at all, like you do for a final pass on a tenon. The example here will be thick 8/4 walnut. So the type of project I'm imagining a cut like this would be used for, imagine a Morris chair where the front legs have through tenons that protrude up through the armrests. You'd want those to be really crisp, sharp corners. That's an area where you don't want to see blowout because it's visible, it's exposed in the finished product. And with lightening our depth of cut and kind of checking our feed rate and keeping feed rate to a minimum, we were able to achieve just dynamite, perfectly flat cuts, no corner chip out. I think any experienced woodworker would be pleased with this cut. Okay, and then we'll repeat all those same cuts on the cabinet saw. This is a 3 horsepower saw stop PCS. I've adjusted the dado brake. Everything's ready to go. So we'll be able to compare if there's any differences in this Whiteside Plus and its performance on the two different saws. So the results there were also very good. I marked which one were the Laguna saws so I could make a note if there was any differences. I do notice that the cuts made on the Laguna were flatter with less grooves. With the grain grooves, there are just very slight ridges in this, so it's really interesting to me. You know, we're trying to evaluate a dado blade. In doing so, we're also evaluating individual saws. So the difference between these two in the with the grain grooves is subtle. When you get to something like this, where we're doing a full width pass, not more than that, but a full 3/4 inch tenon on hardwood stock. This is the one made by the Saw Stop, and I do feel little ridges that I can just barely catch my fingernail on, and that surprised me because the ones that we cut on the Laguna are just dead flat. It looks like it was cut by a single blade. So it must be some difference in the way that the blades sit on the threads of the arbor bolt. It's the only thing I can explain because I know it's not the blade. The blade made these perfectly smooth cuts. But if you put it on a different saw, you may get slight variations in that. That's pretty typical fare with a dado blade, but as long as you have a good saw that's up to date and fully tuned, you should be in good shape. All right guys, some final thoughts on the Whiteside Plus dado stack. I really enjoy evaluating saw blades and particularly high-end dado blades. And what I find most fascinating is what the product engineers settle on as far as tooth geometry and blade count. Now, industry standard right now seems to be 24 tooth outer blades with 4-wing chippers. Now, Whiteside has gone a little different route with the ultra high tooth count outer blades. You get 44 teeth on the outer blades and sticking with a more traditional 2-wing chipper. We're getting really good results with this blade. We did a bunch of off-camera work testing cabinet grade plywood, both with and against the grain. Absolutely no problem with that sort of thing. But I think the better test of a high-end dado blade is actually hardwood joinery. How well can you cut a tenon? How well can you do a cross-grain dado? How well can you do half-lap joinery? So if you can find a blade that does those cuts well, I think you'll be quite happy with it. In that regard, I give that Whiteside Plus very high marks. Hey, if you're in the market for a dado blade in the near future, consider the Whiteside Plus. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.